AV Shop Talk, Episode 21.
Welcome to the AV Shop Talk podcast. You might be wondering why there's no intro music or voiceover right now. Well, we're changing things up just a little bit here in terms of our content. We've got a brand new series that we're kicking off. And Jason, why don't you go ahead and tell our loyal listeners what we're up to this episode?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. So this, like you alluded to, is the first episode in a new series that we're doing called the Business Development Spotlight. And really the goal is, as the name implies, to kind of share ideas and best practices all about business development. And this first one, I was really excited to put together and really enjoyed it. It's all about recurring monthly revenue and managed services. And these are two topics that, to me as a residential integrator, are very near and dear to my heart. Really enjoyed doing this. We did it originally as a AV Shop Talk Live episode, which you can go check out the video on our YouTube channel. And enjoyed the conversation so much that we wanted to push it out as an audio-only episode as well. We had a few guests on, kind of a roundtable style panel discussion, and I really took a lot away from it.
Yeah, and some people might not be aware that, we do the audio-only podcast on the first of every month. But in addition, we do have some video content up on the YouTube channel. So it's a good plug for our YouTube content that's over there if you're into the long format, hangout on air, live streamed type of candid roundtable discussions. We've got some of that over there. So no, this is a great episode for people who are systems integrators that have some sort of business type role and they're making business decisions. And I know to some extent, even the installers need to be aware of this. But if you're one of those maybe C-level type employees that are making C-level type decisions about, what direction your business should go in and how to make it sustainable, this is definitely going to be a good one for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And really the main goal for me in putting this episode together was for everybody listening to come away with kind of at least one actionable step that they could take if they're kind of just getting started or even halfway down that road of implementing RMR and managed service strategies. And I think we accomplished that. Really enjoyed putting it together. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and present our first episode here of the Business Development Spotlight.
AV Shop Talk.
Recurring monthly revenue is a very hot topic in our industry right now. And we look forward to kind of diving into that tonight and really discussing it. And we've got a few guests with us here this evening to help us sort of dissect the landscape and share with us some of the thoughts about what they're doing in terms of managed services and recurring monthly revenue. So before I go any further, I want to put first things first and just introduce all of our guests and thank them again for joining us. We'll start with Greg Scott. Greg is a project manager at Fan Corporation, and he's joining us from north of the border. Greg, how are you?
Not bad. How are you doing?
Doing great. So why don't you take just a quick minute and tell our listeners a little bit about you, maybe a little bit of your personal background and your current position and company right now.
Well, I've been for the last 25 years, I've either been selling, managing, or developing some form of technology for a long time for a number of different companies. And about 12 years ago, I started this one doing software development and eventually just kind of moved into what we do now, which is home automation for commercial and residential. We're about 50-50 in terms of sales, 50% commercial, 50% residential when it comes to revenue numbers. Just over the last year or so, we've been trying to figure out how we can get more out of that with recurring revenue. Because we do alarm systems and security systems as well, but we want to figure out how we can get more managed services with audio video systems as well.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing your thoughts, and hopefully you can take a thing or two away from this as well. For all the Americans in our audience, let us know exactly where you're from. I said north of the border. I know you said Burlington, right? Burlington, Ontario?
Yeah, Burlington, Ontario, just a little bit south of Toronto.
Right on. Well, thanks again for joining us. Our second guest that I want to introduce, a gentleman by the name of Brad Camp. Brad is the sales and engineering manager at Livewire, and he's joining us from Richmond, Virginia. Brad, how are you?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it. Brad and I met out at the CE Pro Summit about a month ago as we're sitting and recording this, and we happened to sit together at one of the roundtable sessions, and we were, I don't actually remember what the specific topic of conversation was, but a lot of it had to do with of course, business practices and recurring monthly revenue came up, and I know Brad's doing some interesting things there. So I wanted to to get him on. Brad, why don't you give us a quick introduction about you, your background, and your current company as well?
Yeah, I've been in the industry since I was 16, so 12 years. I'm 28. My background's actually in consumer electronics retail. I worked for Best Buy and Magnolia for 8 years at the corporate level, designing and engineering AV systems for residents all over the nation. About 3 years ago, I joined forces with a local firm, Livewire in Richmond, which is my hometown, and helped them kind of scale their business into a higher revenue streaming model, and just kind of growing the infrastructure, and been doing that for the last 3 years.
Cool. Well, thanks again for joining us. Our third and certainly last but not least guest here, we have Rob Gerhardt. Rob is joining us from the Atlanta area. And Rob, I think probably at least a handful of our listeners will be familiar with you and your work. But why don't you just jump in here and give us a quick introduction about you and what it is that you do?
Well, what I did was I started my first alarm company 41 years ago. 26 years ago, found myself on the original board of CEDIA. Was heavily involved in getting the expo started. Was the first CEDIA president to actually go out of business 24 years ago. Became a very high-end integrator based out of Connecticut, and then we opened up a branch in Atlanta that focused on builder-oriented recurring monthly revenue through the security channel, and peaked out at about 800 homes a month in 2006. I had left that company in 2003 to start Group Gerhardt. We worked directly with dealers as we learned what they needed. Did a lot of stuff for Crestron, a lot of stuff for Lutron, and about 6 years ago became aware of what I see as the first opportunity for someone with installation skills to actually build a future and create an exit strategy, because recurring monthly revenue is now about 3 times greater in monthly income than it was when I first started. So we focus on recurring monthly revenue.
Very good. Well, we appreciate you joining us this evening, and certainly look forward to you bringing that different perspective and hopefully rounding out the conversation. We've got a couple integrators here, obviously, and look forward to hearing some of your thoughts. Before we go any further, I do want to just quickly define a couple of terms, because we're going to sort of use them interchangeably, and I just want to make sure that everybody listening is kind of on board with what we're talking about. And really, the two big terms that we're going to use are going to be managed services and recurring monthly revenue, which we're calling RMR. It's a very common abbreviation, and they're kind of used interchangeably, but really pull the definition from the MSP Alliance, which is the Managed Service Provider Alliance. And managed services is the proactive management of IT, traditionally, information technology asset or object, by a third party, typically known as an MSP, on behalf of a customer. The operative distinction that sets an MSP apart is the underlying proactive delivery of their service as compared to reactive services, which have been around for decades. So obviously that's an IT definition. We're going to be adapting that to AV, just as the industry is trying to do. Recurring monthly revenue, pretty much self-explanatory, right, with the term. But I think the key here is that it's the portion of a company's revenue that is highly likely to continue in the future. It's revenue that is predictable, stable, and can be counted on in the future with a high degree of certainty. So the obvious example would be security monitoring contracts. But as the industry evolves, we're certainly looking to branch outside of that, potentially at least, and get into doing network monitoring and expanding those services into things like AV. And that's what we are here to discuss tonight. So I want to start out with our integrators, and we'll start with Brad and then go to Greg. And I just want to get kind of a quick summary of what you're currently doing at Livewire in terms of RMR and managed services.
Yeah, so we really have 2 RMR streams in an organization. The first is most common, which is the security stream. And we've been doing that since our founder started the business in 2002. And then more recently, we've adapted a managed service RMR structure, which really revolves around PG and monitoring AV devices that are on the network and associating a monthly service with those with that management.
Gotcha. We'll jump over to Greg here, and let's talk, Greg, about your current offerings and what you guys are doing in terms of RMR and managed services.
Pretty similar. We've been doing alarm contracts for probably about 5 years. So every single custom system that we put in, we make sure that we also manage the alarm system for them as well. In the last year, we've been getting into EHG and trying to make sure that we incorporate that with all the larger systems that we do, because let's face it, time is money. We need to make sure that we can manage these things proactively instead of reactively on Saturday nights when people are trying to watch a movie or the game. So
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I want to touch real quick and bring Rob in here, because both of these gentlemen, Rob, mentioned security, and I know you and I have spoke, and security obviously is a large piece of the RMR puzzle for a lot of people who are into that. And I find it interesting that, excuse me, there's a lot of integrators out there who don't do security. And I'd like you to touch on why you think, some of the reasons are that integrators maybe shy away from doing security, and if you think possibly that's something that they should reconsider.
Sure. First of all, though, I'd like to stress that there's a difference between recurring monthly revenue, which is delivering the same thing over and over with just an incremental cost increase every time you add a new subscriber. And the masters of this would be the utility companies, cable companies. The managed services stuff is more repeat business, in that you have to continue to provide services and shoulder the cost of those services. The recurring monthly revenue component of the managed services is actually the internet provider, not the dealer who's making sure that it works as well as it can. So there's a difference, and the difference surfaces when you try and liquidate your company. Managed services, service contracts, repeat business are certainly worth more than contracting, but they're not worth anywhere near as much as recurring monthly revenue. Another key. So the answer is, why does security seem to not penetrate into the AV world? And probably the primary thing in the United States would be licensing. Many AV guys are not willing to go through the steps to become licensed. In Canada, because of the federal system, there is no licensing, so it's much easier to do there. That's probably the primary barrier, and that barrier was erected by the security companies in an attempt to protect their little world of income generating recurring monthly revenue. So that's probably the primary barrier. The other might be more cultural. A lot of times the AV guys look down on the security guys. I was talking to a manufacturer today, and he thought it was interesting that an AV guy would work for 20 years and at the end of 20 years retire or sell and have nothing to show for it. And the security guy that he was making fun of for 20 years would actually be worth quite a bit of money.
So Rob, before you go any further, I actually want you to kind of elaborate on that for people who may not be familiar with how that works and kind of the nature of, if you have these RMR security contracts in particular. I know this is a big part of what you do, is kind of help people. I don't know if liquidate is the right word. You can tell me.
Yeah,
but help people.
And this is an evolving world, and it is becoming more and more evident that the home automation features of the recurring monthly revenue package, which are generally 2/3 the total. Something that's $40, $50, or $60 a month will probably include security, but the security is probably only worth $14 to $20 of that total. The balance of it is, in fact, remote access, home automation, the ability to unlock your door from Spain, stuff like that. The key thing, though, is to make sure that at the end of the day, there's someone who's willing to buy these accounts, and that the accounts are not tied to the business. And for the last 33 years, a network of well-funded companies willing to buy accounts has evolved to the point where the transactions probably total into the billions every single year. So if you're going to start from scratch, be sure you're picking something that someone's willing to buy, and not just a person or a local competitor, but something where you could actually dictate terms, present your offering to multiple bidders, and pick the best deal. So you have a roadmap if you simply look and see what accounts that are being purchased in quantities and for what amount currently include. And that gives you a clear picture of something that will absolutely work, as opposed to trying to make something that's yet unproven into a recurring monthly revenue machine. That may be hard.
Yeah. Point taken. And I think probably going to come back and talk a little bit more about that market for security contracts and things like that, maybe a little bit later in the show. I want to jump back to this AV portion of it. I call it the AV, but really it's about network monitoring and monitoring the health of a smart home automation type of system. Brad, I know you mentioned, both of you guys mentioned that you're doing it. What technologies, I think you mentioned IHEG, is that really your primary technology that you're using in order to enable the monitoring of these home systems?
Yeah, it is for us, mainly because it's very unbiased. There are other platforms out there that are a little more roped in as far as what products they work with and what products they don't. But IHEG is unbiased, basically talks to 95% of network devices. It really gives us the ability to spec the systems that we think is the best fit for the client and deliver an experience that we can manage at the end of the day, completely unregulated by what type of network we put in, what type of control system we put in. There is a kind of an evolving platform with Snap AV and their Oversee program that we have a little bit of some vision into, and they're looking to expand into that platform. Right now, it is completely roped into their product lines, and it's a free service. So there are plenty of AV firms out there that are doing Oversee, and they're doing it for free for their clients. I think that there's a revenue model that could be tied to it with as basic as it is currently, but they're looking to grow their platform into being kind of an unbiased piece of software that you would purchase, very similar to a IHEG, that would work with third-party programs. And that's something that we will obviously evaluate when it continues to expand.
Sure. Greg, what about you? What technologies are you guys using, if any, in order to enable the more proactive monitoring and management of your clients' homes who are paying for these recurring contracts?
We have a number of security-related contracts. A lot of things like cameras. So we put a video recorder into a house or a business or something like that with a network video recorder, and we make sure we set up all the email alerts and everything on that. So we get pinged, once an hour or once a day or something like that, just to make sure that the system is still running. If we don't see that, then obviously there's an issue, and we call up and try and take care of it proactively. That's happened a number of times. And the other one is IHEG as well. So again, for large systems, we put in IHEG, set it up for everything, and add that into a maintenance contract. Got it.
And talk a little bit about your experience in terms of client expectations and I guess receptiveness to service contracts. I don't know how much I think you guys are a fairly small company, so my assumption is you interact directly with them, and I'd be curious to know sort of how receptive they are to this idea of network management and proactive monitoring of their homes. Not just on the security side, but in terms of what the other offerings you guys are making.
A lot of it comes down to how you sell it. So you have to work, I guess, your client up to it in terms of, okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to proactively manage and monitor all the systems that we just put in your house. You just spent $300,000 or something like that. We want to make sure that we're going to be looking after it so that, you're not going to have any issues and you're not going to be calling us at ridiculous times of night trying to get things fixed. We want to make sure that things are going to be proactively looked after. But we also build that around a larger service contract where we make sure that we go in at least twice a year, beginning of the summer to deal with all the summer parties, and just before the holidays and Christmas to make sure that, everything is running properly for when they have their parties and entertainment. Because nothing's worse than getting every year you get a call on December 24th at 4 o'clock saying stuff doesn't work and you have to go and fix it. So the more proactive we can be with that, the better. As I mentioned, it just depends on how you approach the client with it and make sure that they get some good value out of it. So since we do incorporate it into a larger service contract, that larger service contract has the visits. We extend our service times as well. So our regular times are between 8 and I think it's 5 p.m. So we extend that to either 7 p.m. or 24 hours a day. But when we jump up to that tier, you're obviously paying a lot more for it. We make them pay for that particular level of service.
Now, Greg, I'd like to jump in right here if I can. I've just been kind of listening to you guys talk about, kind of the worlds that you're coming from, and so the company that I work for does strictly integrated operating rooms, right? And we have a service department, and I work right next to the service guys, but I am not involved in the service aspect of it at all. I'm designed in like the design and kind of like the operations of getting the systems installed. So somebody like me, I've never used a service like Ahiji before, and I've heard that mentioned a couple times now. Could one of you guys explain maybe to somebody like me who hasn't, I'm not familiar with what Ahiji does, kind of explain what you mean when you say like that's what you use to manage services over the network?
Yeah, Greg, go. Why don't you go ahead and take that one, Greg? If you have just, I think he's looking just a general explanation of what Ahiji is, which is good because there may be other people listening who might not be familiar with it.
Okay, Ahiji is a small little box. It's got a power port and a network port. Plug it into your network. It'll eventually put some serial numbers into Ahiji's website for it. Eventually, it'll find Ahiji's website, that little box, and then you can tell it to go and scan everything on your client's network. What it'll do is it'll create a list of all the things that it does know and the things that it doesn't know, and then you can start assigning what those devices are and what you expect of them. And when I say what you expect of them, that can be anything from, I want you to ping it every 5 minutes. If it's not there, then notify me. I want you to check the firmware version of the device. I want you to, if it's a network switch or a router, I want you to tell me how much data has been transferred between, since the last time I asked you to do that. There's a lot of, it works on SNMP, so there's a lot of things that you can ask different devices out there based on the SNMP protocol to be helpful in diagnosing remote problems or create conditions to at least alert you to a problem.
Okay, no, that helps me. So it's a physical device that sits on the network somewhere, and like you said, it allows you to ping. And I pulled up their website and threw it up there, and I'm seeing all these IP addresses all over the kitchen and the house and the home theater. So this kind of gives me a better idea. But yeah, Ahiji's not something I was familiar with, so I do appreciate you kind of explaining that. And I imagine there's other people out there that are trying to learn more about this too, and that some of this stuff is kind of like unfamiliar to them. So that's kind of what our show is all about anyway. So
Yeah.
Jason, I'll kick it back to you.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. And Ahiji is definitely an interesting product, and I would encourage anybody to, who wants to get into this to take a look at it. They also, I know, offer a lot of resources for people who are looking to get into this. Brad, I want to bring the next question to you and just talk about your experience in terms of selling this to clients, their general receptiveness, and also just touch on what exactly are you presenting to the client? What is your deliverable when they sign up for one of these managed contracts? What exactly are you bringing to the table?
So, initially the receptiveness, I think, was less received by our sales staff. There's that initial fear of having to sell something else to the client that potentially is expensive, because what we haven't talked about is that in addition to the recurring monthly revenue expense, there's a hardware expense as well. So Ahiji is not free. That black box is not free. As an integrator, you would typically choose what to sell it for. It can range from a very small price to a very expensive price. And then the other thing that we didn't talk about is IP power solutions. So in our world, in the audiovisual world, a lot of devices still don't connect to the network. And the only way that you can remotely power cycle them or troubleshoot them off-site is to just reboot them. So it's important that you sell IP-based power solutions, which is another expense for the client. So that's something you have to really think about from the engineering phase. So receptiveness of the client, again, is really about delivery, how you can improve their experience using a scenario or an analogy about, client not being in their house for a long period of time and then coming back only for specific events, holidays, football games, things like that, and just kind of create the scenario, the worst case scenario for them. Hey, you just showed up, you're here for the weekend, and stuff doesn't work. What if we could prevent that from happening for you? And then showing them, giving them a kind of a snapshot into your dashboard, show them what a real life scenario looks like, what the notifications we get, how we respond to those. We have a nice 8.5 by 11 glossy cut sheet that we can kind of put in front of a customer and kind of go through a few bullet points with them to just give them something physical to look at. And then we also have kind of put our money where our mouth is. We have been able to remotely resolve about 70% of service cases that are created with an Envision account or a HEG account. But the other 30% sometimes still require an on-site visit. And if those particular clients require an on-site visit, we've got built into our RMR structure a discounted on-site rate for those clients that do still require in-person service. The other key for us is to make sure that systems that maybe require Envision on our end, but the customer hasn't bought into the philosophy of it, is to make sure that we design and engineer the system to be upfitted with that solution. So again, making sure that IP power is included in that design. And then in most of our projects that are north of, let's say, $15,000, we go ahead and we configure the HEG appliance inside the equipment rack, but don't activate it. And so at the time the customer has their first bad experience, we remind them, hey, remember that thing we talked about where we can remotely resolve that? That's already integrated in your system. We just need to turn it on. So that's kind of the value proposition that we provide with selling a HEG specifically.
Awesome. Smart idea. Rob, I want to bring it over to you here and get you back into the fray. We're talking about different offerings and what these gentlemen are doing for their clients. And I know you were alluding to the fact that, managed services and I guess maybe pure RMR might be the term are kind of two different things in a sense. Do you think that there will ever be a similar market like exists right now for security monitoring contracts for these type of contracts that these guys are doing with network management and AV?
Yeah, no, but that doesn't mean they don't have opportunities. First of all, security monitoring contracts, the classic $20 a month system that the dealer pays $4 or $5 a month to provide is dropping out of favor at the rate of about 4% per year. So the security guys who are out there probably should sell their accounts as quick as they can, unless they're willing to get more into the interactive stuff, the home automation stuff, the remote access stuff, because the classic security account is declining. What is increasing is the interactive home automation that happens to include security, where the average monthly is somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 or $60 a month. What the integrators, the advantage the integrator has is that he's more respected than a classic security guy. He's dealing with larger transactions. According to CE Pro, even now, the average transaction is about $10,000, and the average dealer does about 65 of those a year. If that same dealer decided to offer, say, an Alarm.com based interactive service, and half of his clients took him up on it, that'd be 30-something a year. You extrapolate out 6 years later, he's bringing in about $9,000 a month. And when he decides to sell, he has something that's worth about $350,000. He did all of that without in any way changing what he loved to do, which was putting the speakers in, securing the network, monitoring the network. There's no conflict here. It's simply a semantics. And the advantage that a dealer has is he can make money doing what does not have RMR. As a general rule, things that provide legitimate recurring monthly revenue are less profitable up front because they have such high value in the long run. And because of that, it's very competitive, so people are willing to provide that for break even or less because they quickly recover that and continue to get paid. So the AV dealer or the integrator has is the opportunity to make money the way they always have, but to gradually build up a recurring monthly revenue base, what I would call a get rich slowly scheme. And as I look at the screen, every one of you has a good 20 or 30 years left to do so. So even modest growth over an extended period of time adds up. And that was my message.
Yeah, I just, sorry to interrupt you. I want to jump in there because you mentioned sort of traditional security monitoring contracts versus kind of the new breed of interactive services. I know you mentioned alarm.com specifically. If somebody is listening who's not familiar with what alarm.com offers, maybe you can elaborate on that. And if there's other, similar offerings, software vendors or manufacturers that you think integrators should be looking at, maybe you can touch on that as well.
Well, your major choices, if you're talking about interactive services, you're talking about some, and of those, your primary providers are alarm.com and Honeywell. Probably the next tier down would be iControl and SecureNet. Each of those, your cost is somewhere in the $7 to $10 a month range, and it enables you to charge realistically probably an extra $35 to $45 for the services. Of those, I prefer alarm.com because they're the least security oriented, even though they have the unfortunate name of alarm.com. Most of the income is not related to security. It's related to the video monitoring, remote access for locks, lights, switches, wellness programs, pet tracking, stuff like that. Things that are, really kind of fun and used every day, much more so than a security system, and in fact, much more so than an AV system. I mean, I've got plenty of all that, and most people don't use their AV, throughout the day, all day long. They certainly don't use their theaters that regularly. And most people don't actually need their alarm system but a few times in a lifetime. But everybody needs to let their child in when they get home from school, or let someone come in and work on the house, or check on the driveway, stuff like that. These are things you do every day, and they just have a built-in appeal that is totally consistent with what an AV guy, and here I'd say more of an integrator. An integrator would be comfortable providing. It's just a question of them understanding what it takes to get started.
Sure. Great answer. Greg, I want to ask you, I know you and Brad both said that you're doing security. Are you offering, I guess, quote unquote, traditional security monitoring, or are you doing some of the interactive services, or perhaps you're doing a mix?
We are not doing any interactive services. There's some differences with alarm.com here. So interactive services in that we're a restaurant dealer, so we build a lot of things into our user interface for doing things like that remotely, for managing your alarm system and turning on and off and watching who does what, that sort of thing. There is obviously the entry level stuff, which you can do with alarm.com, and we'd like to do a lot of that. It's just I don't know enough about how it's supposed to work here to make it actually do what I want it to do, because I know they had some limitations as to for different systems that they would only work with and things like that.
Gotcha. And what about you, Brad? Are you guys doing traditional security monitoring, or more of the new kind of interactive services, or maybe a mix?
Yeah, I mean, we were a mix, but we're almost primarily interactive services now. And we still have a little column on our 8.5 by 11 security sheet that shows the telephone line monitored security system, but frankly, we've kind of priced it to a point where it just doesn't make sense to purchase that when you've got these other systems that allow you, even at the most basic point, to arm and disarm remotely, have some history tracking of who's coming and going from the home, and then having the cellular backup solution. Those things in themselves basically only add $15 a month for our clients, and there's a ton of value there. So we've really kind of moved away from the basic telephone monitored systems. And to kind of take it back to a topic you talked about earlier about AV integrators being somewhat timid about getting into the AV space, or getting into the security space, I'm a case in point of the exact same type of person that you described. I came from 8 years in consumer electronics retail and integration, where we did not do security integration due to liability. We're a multi-billion-dollar firm that just wasn't willing to assume the risk. One of the reasons I came over to an integration firm was to kind of release some of those thresholds and be able to integrate these control systems that we're doing with security systems. But I found myself really uninterested in selling security because it really wasn't something I got in the industry to do. It wasn't that I looked down on the security integrator, but I just wasn't having fun talking about door contacts and motion detectors and things like that. When we really vetted the alarm.com platform, which is really where we do all of our automated security solutions, the AV guys were able to have fun selling security systems again, because they were selling all of the other value propositions: door locks, lighting control, thermostat control, cameras, all the things they were selling before, but had a new cost of entry. We could get into a client's house that we typically couldn't get into by selling a control force of honor restaurant system.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's great stuff. I want to get a little more specific here, and Brad, we'll start with you. And I want to talk, if you're willing to share, and if not, that's fine as well. But I'd like to get, for our listeners, some specific information about how you guys are pricing your recurring monthly revenue, and from the client side, what am I looking at if I'm sitting across the table from you and thinking about buying one of these agreements?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the security, since that's the last thread we were on, we are priced, we have several tiers. So our basic security monitoring with telephone only is $34.99 a month. When you move up to the next tier, it includes interactive services, which basically allows you to arm and disarm your system remotely. It allows you to see history of events, add a few of the automation devices from alarm.com, such as their image sensor, things of that nature. And then you have the cellular backup. That's a $49.99 a month contract. Then we've got a $59.99 a month. We add $10 to add additional automation, such as lighting, thermostat control, things of that nature. And that's really just a $10 bump for us. Most of the other, adding that actual functionality of alarm.com is included in that particular bundle for us. And then we move up to the $69.99 a month, which includes all of the previous things we talked about and video monitoring with alarm.com. And then we have a basic $15 account a month for anybody that just has alarm.com video monitoring and none of the other solutions, because you can get alarm.com video without having the security integration. From the hardware standpoint, we sell all of our security systems. We don't give them away, and that's kind of one of the benefits Rob was talking about. As an AV integrator, we really aren't put in the same light as the ADTs and things of that nature, where we're expected to give the system away, because we offer a different level of service. So we sell our systems. We do give them a discount with a monitor agreement. So there's a discount with a 3-year agreement and a better discount with a 5-year agreement. But it's still really, we still are able to cover our cost of the system and make some money, as well as make the RMR structure. So that's how we manage our security platform. The AHIJI, we have a $49.99 a month. We do it in annual agreements. We don't ask anybody to sign a 3-year or a 5-year, because we really want people to be comfortable in this type of platform. Plus, as Rob mentioned, there's not really an avenue in selling these contracts, so there's really not a benefit of us locking somebody in other than for our sake. And we believe we do a really good job of managing this. So most of our customers continue to pay us $50 a month for this. That, again, does not include the hardware. So we're selling IP power, we're selling the AHIJI appliance, and we're selling our time to integrate it. And then we're making the $50 a month to manage it remotely. And that includes any offsite updates that we have to do for systems. If a client needs a basic light updated through Control4, we can update a lighting scene, things of that nature. And then they have the discounted on-site service if they subscribe to that particular RMR structure with us.
Gotcha. Very good, Greg. I'd like to have you touch on the same question if you're willing to share. And again, if not, that's fine. We can move on. How are you guys pricing your service structure to your clients?
Well, when it comes to security systems and that, we do the same thing. We sell the system. You buy the system from us, it's yours. We don't give it away for free. We don't throw it on a 5-year contract at $40 a month like some large companies do. We sell the system, and then we do a regular monitoring fee for regular telephone dial-up, and then if you want to do cellular backup and that sort of thing, it goes up from there. Similar pricing structure to what Brad mentioned. For the EG services, that is usually built into, again, our overall service contract with the particular client. That pricing is usually based on a percentage of the overall system's cost. So say the system, well, basically it's 5% is what we look at in terms of the service contract cost, and we build in the cost of a HEG and the monthly monitoring for that as well. So 5% per year for the contract. So if it's $10,000, it's $500 or whatever it is. And go
Quick
from
math.
there. So, yeah.
And are you the same way Brad is? Are you doing these annually, asking your clients to renew annually?
Yes, absolutely. And we make sure that we show the value. Now, one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, is with our service contracts is we show up at your house at least twice a year to do something. When we do that, we're in front of the client. Hi, we're here to, clean the TV, remove all the dust from the equipment, tune everything up, recalibrate this, redo that, all these things. We're there in front of the client so they can actually see us doing something and getting value of it. When we're done, we give them a report of everything that we've done so that they can, keep track of what's happened between visits. And that also gives us the additional opportunity to sell the client on something new. Oh, I was thinking of putting, a TV in my son's room now, or something like that, right? So we can use that when the guys are on the job site speaking to the client. We can use that as a way to get back in contact with the client, the next day, ask them about that particular option that they wanted to do, and try and upsell them, sell on a new service.
Gotcha.
The more often you're in front of the client, the more opportunities you have to sell them something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have heard some integrators talk about getting into these service contracts and, really having to reevaluate kind of the way that they track their time spent on a project and to the end of giving the client a little more visibility into that than they might otherwise, as a means of kind of demonstrating the value. So the client, you're giving them subtle reminders on a continual basis of what it is they're paying for. Has it been your experience? Have you been doing that? Has it been your experience that that's something important to do for a client who's signed up for one of these contracts, Greg?
Clients sign up for the contract. We try to, obviously give them as much communication as possible as to what they've actually purchased. And again, we use 5% because I went back and I looked at a number of the systems that we've done. And, as soon as you hit, like, let's say $50,000 or something like that, the amount of devices in that particular system and how long it would take a technician to go around and touch each one of those devices, whether it's inspected or clean it or adjust it or whatever needs to be done, multiplied by your labor rate, usually ended up being roughly around 5 to 6% of the overall contract cost. So you are making money, but you have an opportunity again to make more money because you're again in front of the client, communicating to them about what's going on with their system.
Sure. So kind of to zoom out here a little bit from a higher level, obviously the landscape is changing and we've got a lot of companies coming into the smart home space, cable providers and things like that. Rob, I want to ask you what your thoughts are on sort of the evolving landscape and maybe the good and the bad of these cable providers now advertising and providing sort of smart home as a service offerings. What do you think the effects of that are on the market for guys like us, systems integrators out there?
Well, I think it's wonderful, even though I think the cable providers have no business trying to provide these services to people in their homes. They're doing it simply because they're losing in every other front. Their entertainment programming is declining, courtesy of Netflix and Hulu and Amazon. They've saturated the voice over IP and internet service provider markets, and they're constrained by franchises that only allow them to operate with homes they're physically connected to. But they've always been the only choice. And as a monopoly, they developed the arrogance of a monopoly, and they consistently rank in the most hated companies in the United States. Not sure about Canada, but down here, nobody really wants to do business with Comcast, AT&T, Cox, Time Warner, or for that matter, really ADT. They all resemble monopolies. But what they do, because nobody really likes them, is they saturate the markets, every possible media, with very expensive advertising, to the point where the marketing cost is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, well, I'd say 18 to 20 times the actual recurring revenue that's, monthly revenue that's created. And in doing so, they create an awareness that none of us could afford to create, or no association could afford to create, or no manufacturer could afford to create. And so now all of a sudden people know what you're talking about. And they're talking about smartphone access to the systems in the home. And the real hero in all this is a smartphone. Without that, none of these conversations would even be possible. So these companies they are already. I mean, ADT is installing 1,000 systems a day. They've installed 1.3 million systems in the last 4 years. Comcast has installed 500,000 systems. Alarm.com, which is a provider for independent dealers, is somewhere around 2.3 million subscribers. These are enormous numbers when compared with anything that Crestron or Control4 in its first 10 years did, I think, 172,000 systems. That turns out to about one system per dealer per month. Someone like 2GIG will do that kind of volume in a handful of months. They're approaching 3 million transactions. So these numbers are enormous. And the cable companies, the phone companies, and the largest security company are funding the awareness of the public, and they're doing it in a world where their monopoly status is of no value. And so it creates an opportunity for the dealers that has never existed before. So I think it's great, because they really can't do a very good job. It's kind of neat when people who can't really do the work are paying for all the advertising.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So we're kind of running up against our time here a little bit, and I want to close out. Just start going back to the integrators here on our panel, and I want to talk specifically address people in the audience who are listening and might want to get started with RMR and managed services and are just sort of at that very beginning phase. Brad, what would you say as somebody who's kind of out there doing it already? If you had to put your finger on maybe the one biggest challenge that you faced at the beginning or continue to face in this endeavor, what would you say that is?
I would say the biggest challenge is making sure that we charge for the work that we do. I think with ourselves included, there are a lot of integrators out there that are doing a lot of the things that we talked about today, and they're doing it for free. Don't be afraid to charge for the work that you do. Specifically the RMR portion of things. I mean, even if you're doing just the very, very lightest amount of remote management, like oversee and just managing cameras and things that are in the Snap AV world, there's a value in that. And it took us a little bit of time to figure that out, and it took a product like Ihiji to really strike a nerve and realize that there's a market for this. But I think that was the biggest challenge, is just figuring out not only how to or what to charge, but how to charge for it.
Got it. Greg, same question to you. If you could put your finger on probably the biggest challenge out there to somebody who's looking to get started on this, what would you say that is?
My biggest fear initially was just getting started to figure out how much it costs to charge a client. Once I kind of figured out that whole 5% thing, it is now a line item with a page description after that on every single proposal, every single one.
Yeah.
Just because what's going to happen? They're going to say yes or they're going to say no. If they say yes, great, that's more revenue in your pocket. If they say no, well, then they're bound by the terms of support that you're going to offer them from that point on, which again is documented in the contract. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it's all about how you approach the client with the service contract in the first place. You need to sell it to them, make sure they understand the value to it, but make sure you build the right value into it that appeals to that particular client.
Awesome. Yeah. That makes sense. So just kind of, I'm hearing the theme here. Just get started. Jump in. Try not to overthink it, and just get going. We're going to close out here. I want to go around the horn, and I'll start with Rob. And Rob, if you could just give one piece of advice to anybody listening who is considering jumping into this business, what would you say that is?
Knowledge, learn. Call me. We don't charge. We'll learn what your options are. Learn how people make money at this. Don't assume that you know it unless you really researched it.
Sure. We'll move on, but before we do, Rob, I want to give you a chance just to kind of let our audience know if there is anybody listening who wants to take you up on that and reach out or just connect for any reason. What would be the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, you certainly go to our website, groupgerhardt.com. My email is there. Give me a call. I'm going to be happy to give you my cell number. I can do it right now if you want. Or
if you're comfortable, you can go ahead and do that. Yeah, that'd be perfectly fine with us.
We'll see what happens. 404-510-9264.
Awesome.
Oh my God.
Well, is your phone ringing?
No. There were like 4 people actually watching us now.
Well, plenty of people will hear it. I will point that out, actually, that this will be, for anybody watching, this will be put out as an audio-only episode into our podcast stream. So anybody listening now who may want to revisit this later, it'll be there. It'll also be up on our YouTube channel. And we'll make sure to include some links to that in our show notes at avshoptalk.com. Greg, I'll come over to you and just kind of ask you the same question. I know we kind of alluded to it, but if you could just sum it up to anybody listening who is thinking about getting started, and you could just kind of give them one bit of advice, what would that be?
Well, you gotta do it, because this is where the future of your company is going to be. As Rob was mentioning earlier, your company is unfortunately not worth too much if all you're doing is selling boxes. You need to build in the support and the recurring revenue in order to actually make your company worth something if you ever decide to sell it down the road. I kind of took that as a kick in the pants a few years ago, and that's why I got into doing alarm systems and then building it up from there with service contracts, because I actually want to make this worth something. Right now we have enough revenue. Like, we just started earlier this year. We have enough revenue for everything to support at least one full-time employee a year, their salary. So that person just goes around and does stuff. They're paid for. You got to get started. You got to get started and do it.
Awesome. And Greg, if there's anybody listening who might want to connect with you, maybe pick your brain or ask you a couple questions, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Go to the website, PHAND, please have a nice day.ca.
Is that what that stands for?
Yes, sir, it does.
I never knew. That's great. So that's PHAND.ca, correct?
.ca, correct. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Greg. And we'll jump over to Brad here to kind of close things out. Brad, what would be the one kind of piece of advice that you'd give to somebody listening who just wants to get started and isn't quite sure how to do that?
I probably stole my own thunder with my last comment about the pricing structure, but the other advice I'd give is become an expert. It's not important that you do everything. As far as a security provider is concerned, pick a system that you're really comfortable with and do one system. That's probably a mistake that we made, was offering too many systems, offering support on too many systems. We've really refined. We now offer one or two really robust solutions. We've become experts at those security systems. if a client that has an existing security system wants our support and it's not a system that we work with or we can take over, we replace it. And it's become very routine for us. We're the experts of this system. And then the same thing as this monitored world of AV expands, there are going to be other players. It's not going to be a HEG world forever. Pick a solution that works for you guys and become an expert at it.
All right, you made it to the end of another episode of AV Shop Talk. Thanks for joining us. And if you want to get some more content from us, you might want to check out our YouTube channel. Just look us up, AV Shop Talk on YouTube. We've got some video content over there, along with the video that goes with this audio that you just heard. And that's where we keep, I guess, what I'd call bonus content, Jason. What do you think about that? That's where we keep our bonus content.
Yeah, it's another outlet, and I think that this episode is an example of one that certainly stands on its own as an audio episode, but to tune in and kind of see the faces and put those faces to names and that sort of thing definitely helps. And like you said, we've got plenty of stuff over there that has not been released as audio. So certainly something worth checking out. And this episode, again, was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Want to send a big thank you again to our panelists for coming on and being willing to open up and share some of their ideas and best practices. And I think that, the more of that we can foster in the industry and just having people be willing to come together and share these ideas. I really believe that a rising tide raises all ships. And I think this episode was a perfect example. So hopefully if you're listening, you came away with a little bit of actionable intelligence and things that you can do moving forward to make your business healthier and more sustainable.
That's right on the money here. We're here to help you guys become better integrators, and ourselves. We're trying to become better integrators and just trying to do our jobs the best we can. And along with that, I'm just going to remind you guys that the AV Shop Talk podcast is produced independently by Jason Griffin and myself, Nate Schneider. Musical contributions have been provided by Colin Owens, and voiceover contributions have been provided by John Perry. Actually, not in this episode. John Perry did not provide voiceover.
Yeah, John Perry got the month off.
He got the month off, yeah, until we update our voiceover. So anyway, for more information, please visit avshoptalk.com/episode 21.